All right, Gracia, can you please call the roll?
George Bousset,
Here.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Gerald Richardson, Gary Eater,
Here.
Jim Schultz, Gary Mertig. Gary Mertig on Zoom.
Chair Motig is just a
Okay,
pro forma member, so.
okay.
Okay, so now there's a whole bunch of new people on this committee, so could everybody please introduce themselves?
Gary, would you like to start, please?
I'm Gary Ader from District 19 in Glidden. I represent half of Glidden. Work for the U.S. Forest Service as a fleet manager. I've been in Glidden area I'm 53, all of 4 years when I was in the Air Force. So glad to be part of the conservation team.
Jim Schultz from Marengo, newly elected here, county seat in April. Retired. Let's see. Been involved in farming and such off and on for the last 50 some years. Other than that, just looking to learn and do my best here.
I'm Michael Blunt, and I'm with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We fall under the USDA, and we do conservation on private land and with tribal entities. Our primary focus is water quality and soil health, and to protect the resource and enhance the resource. Our agency's been moving more towards climate smart practices and a lot more forestry work and forestry health. We have a lot of priority practices like manure pit closures and well closures, anything that has direct conduit to groundwater. And we have a local work group meeting coming up in Barron, June 25th. And it's at the county government building. And anybody's more than welcome to come, and you can talk about kind of, what some of your needs are in the area if you feel like they're not already being addressed with the USDA. And that's about it. Thank you.
George Bousset. So I've served on the county board for 2 years now. I was raised by a father who did Mike's job when I was young in Price and Ashland counties. So that hence my interest in this field.
Gerald Richardson, citizen at large, landowner. Been around just as long or longer than George, and that's a long time. And dairy farmed for 42 years, retired in 2014. Always enjoyed being on the committee. Started out on that Farm Service Agency committee, served on there for years, and learned a lot on this committee. And I have a lot of respect for everybody here. And we got to keep trying. And I think Charlie Ortman said it all, so I don't have to rehearse that. But thanks, and thanks everybody.
I'm George Mick. I've been here for 32 years. We're bringing in the new, like Jim Schultz there, and getting rid of the old, right on the button.
I'm Pat Kinney. I grew up on a farm out by Mason. My grandparents bought some of that land back in 29, the day before the market crashed. So we got 210 acres out there. So trying to figure out, how to take care of that and do what comes next. I was in the Navy, which, means water, so land and water. So I can understand Navy guys being on this. Air Force,
Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Keevan. I'm the land and water specialist with Ashland County Land and Water here. Oversee a fair amount of our program works here. So our invasive species program, tree and shrub program, do a lot of environmental education work. And then one of the most exciting things is overseeing our summer staff. And I'll let Ellie introduce herself right now. So happy to be here. Thanks for being here.
Like Scott said, I'm Ellie Croft. I just graduated from Northland College in the May. And I am super excited to be part of the invasives team this summer.
I'm Matt Bolin. I'm the agricultural technician based out of Ashland County, but I cover Douglas, Bayfield, Ashland, and Iron County. My primary focus is on nutrient management planning, farmland preservation, and then the rental of a no-till drill. And I'm also pretty instrumental in putting on field days across the northern 4 counties throughout the summer months.
I'm Seth Hackbarth. I'm the civil engineer technician with Land Conservation Department. Work mostly on cost sharing projects with private landowners and some water quality stuff as well. So
I just have to mention too that Matt and Seth and myself are also all Northland grads. So we are pretty Northland dominant on this staff now. I'm Mary Jo Gingras. I've worked in conservation for over 20 years. I direct our land and water conservation department. I work on the budget. I herd the crew, herd the cats, keep this team going. We have a great, great staff. It's an awesome team to work with. We do a lot of great work together. We also have fun while we do our work, but I write a lot of grants. We bring a lot of money in for the county, and we practice awesome conservation work on the landscape. My specialty is more in native plants and shoreline habitat. So I do a lot of work with landowners on plant recommendations, and we're doing lots of work on adapting to climate now. So that's been a real focus for our department the last few years. So thank you all for your introductions, and thank you for your service to Ashland County. It's appreciated. And for the new guys, enjoy the ride. It's a fun crew to be part of.
All right, I guess I'm last to go. My name is Carisha Flint. I am the administrative assistant in this department. I help Mary Jo with all the grants, all the accounting, budgeting, etc. And I also work in the zoning department. So some of you guys might see me in that committee as well. So nice to see you and meet you all.
She's a great addition and a huge asset to our team.
Okay, and I'm Dan Grady, the county administrator. So we'll go on to the next item here, approval of the minutes. George, is
Move to approve.
there a second?
I second.
So there's a second, Jerry. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public comment. Is there anybody online for public comment? Going once? Okay, there's no public comment. Now today we'd like to recognize the former chair of this committee. Mr. Mika, would you like to stand up and take a bow? Hey, sounds like George.
So as you all know, George mentioned he's been with the county for 32 years. So he began serving on county board in April of 1992 and joined the Land Conservation Committee at the time. He's been involved in endless numbers of resolutions, ordinance development, conservation projects on the landscape, many, many important things that I probably can't even calculate the numbers for. But during this time, this is totally appropriate. It's estimated that he's consumed 480 cups of coffee, 450 plus donuts, 320 county board meetings at a minimum, 160 plus land conservation committee meetings that were chaired, 36 naps taken, 12 state land and water conservation conferences attended, and 4 different county land and water plans developed, which are a 10-year plan. So for that and everything else, I would like to say thank you. And if you guys want to mention, you know, some things too, but I have this little plaque for George so he can remember all of his contributions, and we have a gift for you too. So thank you, George.
You betcha.
We're gonna miss you.
Oh, I don't know if you'll miss me. I'll be around.
I'll miss some.
I kind of just flow, you always see people around like I do at Walmart when I get off the bus. I drive BART bus, you know, and you always see, that's why I go there. You see all the people you don't see all the time.
Do you want to say anything?
You don't even want to get me on that.
Okay.
You know that.
So if anyone wants to share a story or, you know, share anything about George, feel free. And then following the meeting at 11:30, we're gonna have a catered lunch and we're gonna have cake to celebrate too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Gary.
I'd like to say something about George. We grew up together and we farmed together and we both took over our parents' farm, and we got married the same year and we raised families together and our kids. So we always were associated with, went to catechism with them. And we had a real good history and played in sports and so on and so forth. And it goes on. And I've always enjoyed doing things with George, and I agree with him. It's time to step down. He's like me. We can't hear and we don't interpret things properly. And because of that, we know where we are and we want the young people to take over. And I know they're going to do very well, and they have been. So go for it.
Jerry and I bought our first calves together when we were in 7th grade. They were registered calves, and the Black and White Club had bought a bunch of registered calves. And Jerry had bought one at an auction during the day, and at night we both had gotten our first calves. Mine was a 3-week-old registered calf. So we both kind of started. 1964? Well, that's okay with me.
Okay.
One
Oh,
more.
Jim.
I've known George ever since, well, I was young. You know, he's a little older than me, of course, and my older brothers were more in line with that, but we did a number of adventures, to say the least, over the years, logging and maple syruping, farming in general. The one thing about George is very kind-hearted, and he'd give you the shirt off his back and help anybody in the time of need. I have to compliment him on that. Thank you.
All right, on to the business of the meeting. The first item up is election of chair of the committee. As a matter of rules, the county supervisor handbook says that you can only be committee of one chair chair of one committee, and Mr. Kinney is chair of Finance Committee, so he's ineligible to be chair of this committee. George?
In consideration of engaging the younger members of the team, I'd like to recommend Jim Schultz for the chairman of the committee. I seem to be the senior guy here.
Is there a second? Yes, sir.
I don't believe we need seconds on nominations.
No, we don't, I guess not.
Yeah.
Is there, are there,
But I
any-
certainly will support the nomination.
okay, are there any other nominations? Okay, all in favor of Mr. Schultz being chair of the committee? All right, Mr. Chairman, the gavel is yours.
Well, thank you, everybody, for your vote of confidence. I'm very new to government and the way it works here, so you're gonna have to bear with me.
So Jim, if you want to just pull up your agenda, and then that was item number 5. So then everything that's in black bold is going to require motions. So then moving on forward from here, what we'll do is just read the agenda item, and then we'll act on it from there. And if it's not in bold, then that's something that I'm probably going to be addressing. So then I'll just let you know that. So we'll just start with item number 6, and you can read it, and then we'll act accordingly from there.
We need a vice chair elected next.
So we're gonna,
So,
Entertain-
Mr. Schultz, you want to, yeah, so you want to take nominations for vice chair?
yes, correct. Is there, take nominations for the vice chair position? George?
I'd like to recommend Pat Kinney for the position of vice chair.
Gary?
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Charles Ortman.
He's not a member.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that.
Thank you.
So we have a nomination on the floor for Pat Kinney. Is there any second?
Second. Oh, I did the first, to do the second.
Any other nominations?
Any other nominations? You gotta call that 3 times?
No, yeah.
Any other nominations? Any other nominations?
I would like to close nominations and unanimously cast a ballot for Pat Kinney as vice chair of this committee.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next would be the LCC appointment of citizen representatives. Are there any nominations for this position? Mr. Katie?
I'll nominate Charlie Ormond and Jerry Richardson.
As a matter of, as a point of order, the county board already approved these appointments.
Could you repeat that?
The county board already approved those 2 appointments. They were part of we did that on April 30th.
I moved to approve the appointments of the county board.
I move to approve the appointments of the county board.
Second by George Bousset.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appointment of Northwest Area Wisconsin Land and Water Representative and alternate. Is there any discussion on that? George?
I suggest Charlie Ortman. Don't believe you need to be a member of the county board to assume that position.
Correct.
Any other nominations? All in favor? Aye. And opposed? Motion carried.
Does that mean
We also need an alternate. So this is for our state association, our area. So every time that we have area meetings quarterly, we would have a land conservation department representative, which is typically me, and an alternate. And we would have a land conservation committee supervisor, representative, and an alternate that would attend those meetings.
So I need a motion for an alternate. Charlie?
I'm going to ask Gary Eater if he would be willing to accept it, because if he will, I'll decline.
I'll accept it.
All right, thank you. I'll nominate Gary Eater, but I might tag along to a conference if I can.
Any other nominations? So we have one motion right now for Gary Eater and
I think you, did you approve mine? Yeah, so I've been elected as a rep, now we're just doing alternate.
all right.
There's also a motion on the table, though, for Pat Kinney.
Well, I declined it, so, and there was no second. Well, we didn't need a second, but I declined it.
So all in favor of nominating Gary Eater for alternate? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Next on the agenda would be LCC training of the Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation.
Point of order.
Oh, excuse me. Appointment of Northwest Wisconsin Land and Water Representative and alternate. George?
So for the Land and Water Conservation Department staff, I would nominate Mary Jo Gingras to be the primary representative.
Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Now, the Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association Video and Handbook.
Okay. We also need an alternate staff person for number 8, please.
Number 8 or 9?
Our agendas are different.
Yeah, so we just need an alternate for a staff person as well. It says representative and alternate.
Okay, that would be for which one then? Number 9? Okay.
We're appointing a staff representative and a staff alternate.
So we've already got the representative
Yeah.
appointed and now we're looking for an alternate.
So Chair,
George?
I'd like to ask Mary Jo's recommendation for that position.
Who would like to do it? All right, Scott, you're the tenured person here. So George, if you could nominate Scott, please. Scott.
Okay, I place the name of Scott Craven for the alternate for the Land and Water Conservation District staff position with the Land and Water Conservation Association.
Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? All in favor of Scott Caven for the alternate, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association, that's our parent association for the state of Wisconsin. They provide trainings. They coordinate the conference for us annually. They do a number of trainings for staff throughout the year. They also have a number of committees. And on their website, they provide webinars that have been pre-recorded. So I did pass out a list to everyone from the Wisconsin Land and Water website. It was a single white sheet of paper that I passed out. There are a number of wonderful webinars that are related to all sorts of different conservation topics. I highly recommend that you view those as you have time. But since we have newer committee members from the last couple years and now, I'm going to take some time for the rest of our meetings this year to show some of these training videos. So this one, unfortunately, is not the most exciting video, but it's probably the most important video. And this talks about Chapter 92. This is the state chapter that assigns our regulatory powers to the Land Conservation Committee. It also talks a little bit about what we do. For those of you that will be attending the workshop next week, you'll also be receiving a handbook. But when you joined the committee, I did provide a copy of the Wisconsin Land and Water Committee handbook to you, and then I gave a copy to the new members today. So if you have any questions about the video after, just feel free to ask, or if you're looking for other resources, I'd be happy to provide that. And then we'll go ahead and start the video. I think it's 9 minutes.
Today's webinar, I will address why Chapter 92 is important, focusing on the Wisconsin state law that is the backbone of our soil and water resource management program. Included in this presentation will be the roles and responsibilities of land conservation committees, or LCCs, and briefly, the roles and responsibilities of land conservation department staff, or LCDs. Why Chapter 92 is important to you? Chapter 92 is our soil and water conservation and animal waste management law. It was enacted by the Wisconsin State Legislature in 1981. It contains important information about the authorities, roles, and responsibilities statutorily provided to land conservation committees, or LCCs. The foundation of LCCs, and every LCC member, newly elected or long-serving, should know it thoroughly. The statute also contains important soil and water resource management information outside of the scope of LCC. In straightforward language, it declares soil erosion and resulting non-point source water pollution in the state to be, quote, endangering the health and welfare of the state citizens, its recreational resources, agricultural productivity, and industrial base, end quote. It continues on to declare the policy of the state to, quote, halt and reverse the depletion of the state's soil resources and pollution of its water, quote. These are powerful declarations and provide strong backing for the shared work of LCCs and LCDs. The statute also establishes and defines authorities for the Land and Water Conservation Board, which is covered in another webinar on the Wisconsin Land and Water website. It defines the duties of the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection, DACAP, and the Soil and Water Resource Management Program the DACAP administers, also available in a webinar on the Wisconsin Land and Water website. Lastly, it is important to note that while Chapter
Before we start that though, we're going to show one other short video. Does anybody have any questions on that one? I do want to clarify one thing. In the beginning of the video, it mentioned the representation of the committee and it included Farm Service Agency. So that would be the partner to Michael Blunt's office with NRCS. We no longer have a representative from Farm Service Agency on this committee. That was changed last year. So this video was produced about 4 years ago, 3 years ago. So a couple things have changed since then on some of these videos, and that was one of them. So just to clarify, we no longer have a representative from Farm Service Agency on this committee. Okay, sorry, Jerry. Yes, Charlie. For the ordinances. So if an ordinance is gonna go for review, if it's a local ordinance, that would be through our county board. So if we update any of our ordinances, like zoning department updated one of their shoreline ordinances a couple of years ago. So that they reviewed it and then it went to the zoning department or the zoning committee, and then it was approved by county board. Oh, a referendum. I did not hear that part. Okay. Yeah, that's how it's handled in this county. So I'm not sure if it's different in other counties. But when we have ordinance reviews or updates, it goes before the committee. And then the committee recommends it to the county board and the county board will approve it at the county level. Yeah, I think we can probably look at the chapter too. Just read the chapter verbiage and see what it says there. Of a vote. No, definitely not. Yeah.
Oh, oh, damn, that hurt. Oh. Mm.
And we're gonna go ahead and stop there because a lot of their staff have changed. But basically, I just wanted to give you guys a brief introduction of who Wisconsin Land and Water is and kind of how they serve us, and that's our parent association. Were there any questions on that section? Charlie? Yeah, as of about 3 years ago, every county was a contributing dues paying member to the Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association. And the state conference is always held the first or second week in March. So as committee members, you will all have opportunities to attend that conference if you wish, because we do budget for it annually.
Charlie, can you use your microphone, please? That way, nobody online can hear without it.
You actually have to push the button. Yeah.
Ah, well, I ain't saying that all over again. Oh, sorry about that.
We're on to number 11 now, the 2023 annual report.
Yeah, so we annually typically develop an annual report. We basically want to provide this to help educate about who we are, what we do. This report went out to all county board members as well. So we as a team are going to go ahead and go through this report. And if you guys have any questions at any point, just feel free to ask. Carisha was instrumental in developing this report this year, so she is greatly appreciated. We used a new format this year called Canva. It's a presentation and media development website. So that was a little bit of learning for both her and I to figure it out, but I think it produced a wonderful publication. And Carisha, if you could go to page 2. I'm mostly going to talk about some of our administrative grants, the money side of things. So there's a few fast facts there in the middle that are in the color blocks for you. But last year was a phenomenal year financially for our department. Administratively managing over $600,000 in grants was a major task. It's the largest grant year I've ever had in my 20-year career. So I learned a lot too, just about quality versus quantity and what's manageable. But last year we secured over $600,000 in grants for the county and landowners, and that came from different state and federal sources. We have a good success in being able to consistently acquire grants, and we're able to utilize unique funds. This is an incredible asset to Ashland County, particularly because some of these grants are only available to land conservation departments. And we also have a unique geographical placement being right on Lake Superior. We have access to grants because we are on Lake Superior that other counties in the state don't have access to, inland counties. So there's many grants that are available for Great Lakes resources that we're able to capitalize on. And that helps us to protect our waters and protect Lake Superior coastal waters. If you move on to page 3, Carisha. The administrative summary here shows our main sources of revenue and our associated expenses for last year. So our DAT cap, that is the Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection. That's an annual grant we receive. It's a non-competitive grant, but we are required to apply annually to it. That provides support for staff and administrative support costs for the department. The DAT cap, SWARM, Soil and Water Resource Management. Those are our cost share funding that we provide to landowners. So Seth will be talking about some of our conservation practices that we installed on the landscape last year. We get about $50,000 annually, and we're able to work with private landowners on conservation practices in which they receive 70% reimbursement of the cost. The Wildlife Damage Program, that program compensated producers and farmers who had received damage from bear, deer, geese, elk, turkey, crane. And that was a program that was reimbursed by the state. We are no longer implementing that program. This year, we decided to turn that back to the Wisconsin DNR. So we still administer it locally, but the state provides the staffing and the abatement resources on behalf of the county. Nutrient Management Grant. This is provided to landowners who write a nutrient management plan to ensure that their fertilizers and nutrients are not running off the landscape into waterways. Landowners receive a $40 payment per acre that they enroll in nutrient management plans in our department. So that's an annual program that we administer. Matt's in charge of that program. Our annual tree and shrub sale, you can see what the revenues and expenses are. That sale's been going on for 25 years. Scott will talk about that. Part of that sale, we allow people to provide donation to our youth programs. So 2 lines down under the tree and shrub sale, you can see what was donated last year for revenues. We provide scholarships to students who participate in our youth conservation poster and speaking contest. So those funds help fund those scholarships. We also participate at different youth events in the county. The no-till planter, that is our no-till machine that we rent out to farmers for planting of seeds in the spring. And then down below that are our competitive grants. So for a few years, we've been talking about Act 157. That's the natural flood management work that we implemented in the Marengo area last year. We'll be finishing that grant up this year. That total grant was $150,000. So we have about $120,000 left that we'll be wrapping up this year. The National Association of Conservation Districts, that grant helps fund our agriculture technician position. That's a new grant that we began receiving 3 years ago. This was our 3rd successful attempt. We'll continue applying for that grant in the future. Department of the Army, we used funding to design some flood management conservation practices. Our Wisconsin DNR Clean Boat, Clean Water Grant, that helps fund our summer staff to work at landings to educate boaters about aquatic invasive species and responsible practices. DNR Lake Monitoring Protection Network that helps fund all of our lake monitoring work throughout the summer. Both of those DNR grants are non-competitive, but we still have to apply annually for those. And those will be repetitive allocations that we receive in those same dollar amounts in the future. We had a Wisconsin wetland grant and a Wisconsin DNR surface water grant last year that we used on wetland restoration practices. We had a Office of Great Lakes Waters grant and the other DNR grant below that, the Great Lakes Restoration. Both of these are unique grants and that they are applicable only to Great Lakes waterways. So that's one of the places where I mentioned that our geographical location helps provide some advantage for us to receive funding sources. Those projects also were part of our natural flood management work in the Marengo last year. And the last item there listed was a emergency management grant that was actually written by Dorothy Tank a couple years ago, and we provided some consulting work to her department. That was a reimbursement to us. So last year, our county levy was approximately $25,000. And for every dollar of county funds that we were able to bring in, we were able to generate about $26 of outside funds. Last year was our largest grant year on record for our department. It was very successful. We were able to accomplish quite a bit of work. And some of these grants, we will be repeating. Several of them were closed out at the end of the year and likely will not be applied for again, such as like the Department of the Army. Other grants like the Wisconsin DNR Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, those will be periodic grants that we'll apply for in the future. Does anybody have any questions on the funding side of things? Okay, we'll move on to our Marengo River Natural Flood Management Project.
So a little bit of background on this project. I was hired in September of 2022 under a grant to administer these projects throughout the year of 2023. And that was some of the Act 157 funding and GLRI funding that Mary Jo mentioned. So with this, we're looking at more natural ways to deal with floods and higher velocity flows. So we're working on three to four project sites that Mike Pirro had started before he retired. He had a good start on them, but with other workloads and nearing retirement, we needed to build a little bit more capacity. And so I was brought on to help with designs, permitting, and project installation. So we were able to install 2 of the 3 projects that we had planned. One was the post-assisted log structure project. That's that middle picture. Those are mimicking log jams and historic beaver activity to disperse the flow back onto the floodplain and accumulate sedimentation in the channel. That's what the other picture on the bottom is also. We also installed a wetland complex that was a series of scrapes and just to create more open water on the landscape and slow down flows. That's kind of the theme for all of these natural flood management projects, is to just slow the flow and disperse water back onto landscape where you can. Another project that was not able to happen was the top picture on that page. There's a large gully coming from the edge of a farm field. So that is planned to be installed this summer. We have all of the necessary permits, funding, contractors lined up, just waiting on some better weather. So, waiting for the rain to stop. So that project will happen this year, and that'll be kind of a mix of some more engineered practices, where with the post-assisted log structures, that was a newer practice that isn't necessarily used in Wisconsin or in our region. It's more used out west or in Vermont. So this project that's going in this year is a mix of known, tested, proven projects that can also manage floods and flows coming off of farm fields to kind of secure that soil and not lose ground that's precious to farming. And in addition to those projects that I was working on, and like I mentioned, Mike Piro also implemented a lot of these projects last year before he retired, but there was a number of fencing projects, fencing and livestock watering with Ed Redinger that was in combination with NRCS. NRCS did cover a good portion of the project, so that's why our cost sharing was lower on that. We can do up to 70% if funds and the situation allows. Livestock fencing with Bruce Kleinstaber, pretty straightforward project, as well as the access road with Mark Jolma. That's a good aerial shot. Matt was able to help out and take the drone and get some good pictures out there with that project, the access road, watering facility.
I just want to mention for the access roads, there's about 36 different practices that we, maybe a little more, that we're able to provide engineering design on and assistance and cost sharing. An access road is typically used on farmlands where farmers need to have access from one farm field to another. Sometimes the roads will cross a ravine, cross a waterway, that would be a crossing. But access roads are designed to provide stable substrate through areas that are prone to erosion. And this would provide stable substrate for movement of vehicles, equipment, and sometimes livestock as well.
And the project with Bob Reamer, that was some more access road, repairing his fencing and a watering facility. That one, Mike did pretty much all of that one, as well as the fencing with Ed Redinger and Bruce Kleinstaber. And then that livestock fencing picture with Kriskovich, that's another picture from Bob Reamer's project, so that didn't exactly line up, but there was some exclusion fencing there to keep cows out of the creek, and we're going to be finishing up a stream crossing with him this year that was carried over from last year to still allow access in his field, in his pasture as well, keeping the cows out of the creek. And then the post-assisted log structures, which I mentioned in the last page, the narrative page, there was also some rock riffles involved there for some more head cut control and grade stabilization, channel bed stabilization in the ravine system, and the wetland restoration project with Jason Fischbach as well. Are there any questions on that stuff? Yeah, George.
I just wonder if there's any such thing as slowing down the water too much. Because we have an awful lot of mosquitoes this year.
Yes, you can.
Yes, we don't typically have that problem, but one example of slowing down water too much would be is if we are recommending rain gardens in yards or places where water already pools. We do not want to encourage water to stand in pond. Our goal is to slow water down and encourage infiltration into the ground. So in areas where there's already standing water or water that congregates or exists permanently, we're not necessarily encouraging more water to go to those places. So the projects that we're working on designing are designed to allow water to store and then slowly infiltrate into the ground, except some of these wetland restorations. These are landowners that are looking for wildlife habitat improvement. So water would be, this would be areas where wetlands had previously existed on the clay plain, and then during the agriculture era, these were drained so that farming practices could occur. And now in certain areas like Jason Fishbach's property there, those lands are no longer in production, and he was seeking wildlife improvement. And it was an area that was prone to flooding. So we utilize that landscape to slow water down. It is gonna remain there perpetually now unless we have severe prolonged droughts. But it's also there to provide wildlife and habitat improvement for him.
All right, so our Wisconsin DNR Lake Monitoring and Protection Network, as well as our Clean Boats, Clean Waters grant, kind of as always, I'll kind of go through it, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. So that's kind of the primary funding for a lot of our invasive species program related work. We are very much heavily focused on the aquatic side of things. But we also do some terrestrial invasive species monitoring and control as well. There's a lot of really, really good partners that focus on the terrestrial side of things. So that's kind of why we focus on more of the aquatic side of things. There's not nearly as many partners that are doing things like inland lake monitoring, especially in Ashland County. So I'll kind of go through a few of these things here. So we've got so it looks like Creesh is on the next slide there. So it funds a lot of, kind of the core of it is monitoring, education, and then control. So as far as our educational programs, we implement all kinds of different programs, anything from Clean Boats, Clean Waters, basically educating folks at local boat landings to educate them on aquatic invasive species, as well as AIS prevention. We also implement a lot of different programs like citizen lake monitoring networks. We work with local lake associations, as well as just citizens that live on lakes, or even if they don't live on the lake, but are interested in protecting our inland waters, whether it be inland lakes or river streams, or of course Lake Superior, working with those folks. And we also do, I sit on a lot of different planning committees for different educational events. So things like invasive species ID days at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center, sit on the planning committee for that. As well as things like the Student Science Expo, educating all kinds of middle schoolers and high schoolers on mostly invasive species, but also just kind of conservation and natural resources as a whole. And then we do a lot of other activities that you see listed there. So educating basically any stakeholder group, whether it be boaters, anglers, hunters, trappers, folks that are into canoeing and kayaking. Of course, the youth is absolutely huge, working with a lot of local schools. And then kind of control, we do kind of our main species that we go after. So purple loosestrife, garlic mustard, invasive knotweeds, yellow iris. So we do a lot of invasive species control projects as well. Some of those we lead as part of the Land and Water team, and then others, especially bigger infestations, we team up quite a bit with Wisconsin DNR, the Northwoods Weed Co-op, Bad River Tribe, Glyphwick, Northland College, and a host of other partners. So always nice to get that community involvement and partners whenever appropriate. Let's see, our monitoring program, still a huge emphasis. Ashland County is in a a very, very unique and pretty awesome situation where we really don't, most of our inland waters really don't have a lot of the very problematic invasive species that you see at a lot of in a lot of counties. So we kind of look at our role. We do have a lot of invasives in Lake Superior, but very, very few inland. So we really try to really kind of make sure that we're doing everything within our power to prevent any invasive species that might be in Lake Superior and make sure that they're not traveling inland. So you see the lakes that we've monitored in previous years there. Typically, we focus on about 10 inland lakes to monitor, and then we hit a bunch of high traffic, high risk sites in Lake Superior. And you can see the invasive species that were either discovered or hopefully not discovered because they weren't present. And then let's see, kind of moving along here, the tree and shrub sale last year was another great year. We had about 129 orders, and then we had a few leftover trees and shrubs that we sold after that as well. So probably about 140 orders in total. So as you guys are well aware, we've kind of switched over from going mostly the younger seedlings, and most of the feedback that we've heard from folks over the years is that they really want those older transplant species. So we've really kind of made that transition and go into a lot more transplant trees. And then you can see the numbers for our youth programs there, donations, and yeah, that goes to a lot of our local events. We make donations there, as well as our poster and speaking contest as well. Adopt a Highway, I will turn that over to Seth, and then I believe I have one more section. So Seth, if you want to take that away.
Yep, last year, the picture there. Oh, sorry, Pat.
I'm going to ask Scott a question or two. Sure. And this is more of a comment, and you could probably address this in a future meeting in more detail. The Vaughn Library's got a book that came out in 2015 titled Beyond the War on Invasive Species. And as soon as I saw the title, I knew that, yeah, it kind of speaks to me and my thoughts about buckthorn. You know, it's a battle so far I can win because we don't have too much out on the 210 acres I have, 4, 5, 6 a year I'm keeping up. But I know because of what's in the neighborhood, I know that if I'm not there, somebody else, you know, I live a block from Northland College, and if you are ever out that way, you know, it's buckthorn heaven. So as I go down the highway, you know, like Highway San Bernardino Avenue here, I think, boy, some of that buckthorn's in the right of way. Could the county highway department go out a little further and mow some of that down, because so much of it spreads along the highway? The kind of basic point or question for a future meeting is, the author goes through a lot of stuff, and we talk about native plants. And so how do we define native plants? You know, what point in history do we go back to? Do we take into account what Native Americans did with their burns, you know, and controlling, you know, what they did for reasons they did, and how that contributed to some of what, when, you know, the early explorers came here, you know, the landscape they saw, and then they reduced burning, and then they started plowing, as they found out in the 1930s in particular. That didn't work so well with the Dust Bowl. So this whole notion of native plantings, and then how we control them, you know, perhaps the chemical control so much, you know, are we going to win some of these battles or not? You know, as we disturb soil, there's a succession process that comes through. We have climate change, so what grows in one place may not grow in another place. And then, you know, with everything, with all forms of wildlife, you know, they each have their niche and their purpose. Are we considering some of those, you know, what wildlife, insects, butterflies, you name it, bees, you know, need or don't need? You know, we're trying to restore things to a point in time where the climate was different, you know, rain and, you know, snow and everything. So some of what we have done as humans, we have this notion of getting things back to where they once were, long before we existed, but to a time in this country where Native Americans did a lot to the landscape that we took as wilderness, and that's the term that she uses, when in fact it was impacted by humans, but we just didn't realize it so much at the time. So I'm wondering, some of these battles that we fight, especially with chemical use, are they battles we're going to win? Is it the best use of our time and resources? How do they fit with climate change, and what's the need for, all forms of wildlife, insects, bugs in particular, including the mosquitoes? I don't know that I would like to talk about that more, because I know I'm going to lose some battles out where I'm at, and it's partly the towns go through and they put down sand and gravel doing roads, and every time that happens, yep, there's new weeds I haven't seen before, and once they're on the roadside, guess what? They're on my place too, and some of what I'm fighting, I look at my neighbors and yep, they got it too, and I'm not getting that because, so some of this is just accepting reality as it is and then making the best choices with this. And I'd really like to talk more in depth about what we're doing and why, and understanding the rationale for it, because we all have limited time, energy, resources, and it's pretty easy to blindly, let's do this because somebody says do it. And I've done enough of, blindly following stuff, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So I'd really like to dive into more of that as we go. And then the trees, I'd like to talk about maybe getting some smaller ones again. The cedars in particular, mine are going out in full sun. It's wet, and even when I water them, I'm lucky to keep half of them. I'm having a lower survival rate with some of that, and I'm thinking part of it is mine are in full sun. Other people, if they get some shade, that may be helping. And also, I'd really, maybe if we get a forestry expert, one thing I read is, if I've got multiple stems on cedar, maybe I can cut out several to leave as little green on top as possible, just so they can get established. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, because I'm not sure I trust the sources on some of that I'm reading. So if I can just get them to survive, my smaller ones have a higher survival rate than my bigger ones, at least where I'm putting them in full sun. And I've mulched them, and I've got the fabric around them 3 feet by 3 feet, and I water them, and it's like, man, this is harder than it should be. But even some of those bigger evergreens, when I was in 4-H as a kid and we planted trees, it seemed like most of them made it. We planted smaller trees than what we're, getting now. And I don't know how much this is climate change or just bigger trees, but again, more green on the top, and the trees having a harder time surviving, at least on my higher, drier soil. I'm having such a poor success rate on white pine and red pine of all things. And I don't know why. So I'd like to talk about, maybe over the winter, we get some forestry experts to help us based on soils and moisture that different people are planting on, to help us better understand, what can get us past that first year to get them established. Because like I say, in 4-H, just almost everything we planted made it. And now same soils, why is this so different? And my answer would be climate change, but so how do I adapt? And I don't know the answer to that right now. So to be a kind of a winter thing to figure out.
Mr. Chairman, we have a guest here at the committee today. And actually, I'll introduce her. She's our new grant writer, Erica Hanikel, and she has a question.
Yeah, my question is, I'm wondering if or how Ashland County is kind of encountering dealing with jumping worm so far. I've heard that it's here. And I'm just wondering if we have anyone focusing on it, or if that's going to be a sort of upcoming thing that we need to focus on, the sort of like land part of this. I understand that wasn't your focus here, but yeah.
I don't know anything about jumping worm, so I'm about to be educated.
So far, Wisconsin DNR has handled all issues related to jumping worm. Yeah, it's another one of those invaders that is absolutely knocking on the door. One huge thing about that, so that was, I'm sure you heard about the, I believe it was EW Madison, how it was found in a lot of I believe it was right at their nurseries there, and how trees were sold from there, and it really spread out from there. So fortunately, I guess kind of the good news is that Ashland County doesn't have a whole heck of a lot of it. But to say that it's not going to be an issue in the future is, I think that's being pretty ignorant. So yeah, it's definitely an issue right now. Wisconsin DNR is kind of taking the lead, being such a new issue. I believe DATCAP is also involved with that. We work with DATCAP. So like this year they sent out an inspector to inspect all of our trees and shrubs, that was really nice. They showed up right at our tree and shrub sale, which was really good because obviously we don't want to be spreading that kind of stuff too. So it was really nice to get there, especially dealing with invasive pests. It was nice to get that lady's recommendations as well. But yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the easy answer at least. So, but yeah, it's going to be, I'm glad you brought that up. That's going to be an issue that will be here to stay.
No, we'll give Scott a quick breath of air here while I talk about Adopt a Highway. Typically twice a year, we go out on the stretch of Sanborn Ave, Highway 112, from 6th Street to Weister Road, and pick up all sorts of goodies. Think in that picture, there's some crutches and found tires and bookshelves, so hard-boiled eggs and lots of Quick Trip wrappers. So if you see us, give us the horn and say hi.
Alrighty. Yeah, back to myself, I guess. So just want to talk to you guys a little bit about our poster and speaking contest. So this is one thing that I'm very proud of, just seeing just kind of that snowball effect. So we had 159 entries in 2023. That was the most in Ashland County history, which was really neat to see that. We also had the most amount of winning entries at the regional level, and then as well as the most amount of entries at the state level as well. So we had really good representation there. So not only do we have good numbers, but also, these folks did just a phenomenal job. It was really neat to see. One thing that I was very proud of is so every school within Ashland County, every district was represented. There was 100% participation by each and every school. So it wasn't like it was, just the Ashland school or, just Mellon or whoever. Every single school in every part of the county was represented. So that was really neat to see. And then similarly, just to kind of build off that, also private school, homeschool, and then obviously the public schools, we had involvement from those folks as well. And let's see. Yeah, just kind of building off of that, it's really grown. We've had more teacher involvement than ever before. And then next year I will talk about the 2024 poster contest, but it was another really successful year as well. It's just kind of that snowball effect really building, and I'm trying to do my best to kind of get into these classrooms too and do little talks to really get folks on board and spread that conservation message and get them to really active. So yeah, as always, happy to answer questions. I think I'll sign out. Oh, okay. Yep. Go ahead there, George.
Will the posters be on display at the county fair in August?
That is a really good question. So all of the posters are returned back to the students. That is a really good idea. I like that a lot. If we could get either the original copy or another thing that we've been doing just in the past, I'd say 5 years, 6 years or so, is we always frame, I would say about probably 2 or 3 posters a year. So that would be that's a really good suggestion. I would definitely be 100% supportive of doing that.
Yeah, if you change the process, you can make a really good display, and it would be an incentive for students to participate. You could display them all.
So the posters, it's run through our state association. So the state puts this out. Every county that wants to participate holds their own contest. And then the winners from Ashland County go to our area meeting. And then those winners from the area go to the state conference, which is always in March. So we're participating on the whole state level. And if we wanted to hold the posters till the fair, we would have to ask these students, we collect them in January or February, and then we would be keeping all of their posters until probably September. And a lot of these kids really want their posters back.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how, how we would do it annually, but like Scott mentioned, we do have over a dozen posters in our office that are framed in our hallway. And we could bring those posters and display those.
If the kids knew that their poster could be displayed at the county fair, they might be entirely willing to wait.
Yeah, the only challenge I see is that we return them to the schools. So by this time now, we'd be in a new school year. Some of these kids leave, the seniors are graduating, so we do have some senior level too. So, we can explore that idea.
Yeah, I really like that idea. Maybe one way of doing it is, to me, that looks like art. And with 4-H, if they're in a 4-H club, could they exhibit that as a work of, art that they have done? And that way there's, they can make a few bucks too.
One of the points of doing this would be drawing attention to the work of the Land Conservation Department. And so to make it a separate display would accomplish that.
Just what additional contest of it or comment there. So I always send out like the winning entries to local newspapers, and we do have a good working relationship with especially the Daily Press, and then the Bottom Line. We've had excellent results from those folks. They always get the winning entries in, and that's been a really kind of a nice touch. Not quite as good of luck with other newspapers within the county, but yeah, Bottom Line and Ashland Daily Press, they get their the pictures of their poster, basically a screenshot, kind of what is displayed on the screen there. So yeah, nice to give them the recognition that they most definitely deserve.
All right. So in 2009, the state developed NR 151, which is it's a standard for farmers to control runoff for their fields, pastures, and livestock facilities. Part of what that requires them to develop is called a nutrient management plan, which outlines the times, amounts, locations, methods, and other aspects of fertilizer manure applications. We combine that with soil sampling data, crop rotations, and tillage practices to ensure compliance with soil loss and phosphorus standards. And I sit down one-on-one with farmers and help them develop these plans, and really develop a relationship with these farmers. Mary Jo kind of already touched on it. One thing that they get out of a benefit from it is we do offer a one-time cost share when they first get into it of $40 per acre. They do have some time and money into it. They do have to get one soil sample for every 5 acres, which costs them about $8.50 plus shipping. But that more than covers the $40 that we offer them per acre, more than covers what their expenses are. Then I sit down with and update with them every single year. As of the end of last year, 25 producers in Ashland County had nutrient management plans covering a little over 11,000 acres, which is a little over 21% of the farmland. And right now it's mostly been the classes that are offered are kind of more one-on-one. This year we're switching a little more to bulk classes just because of how many people there are. They still get the one-on-one attention to update, but the field days that we'll be doing this year are hugely focused on nutrient management, and we'll probably be doing a bulk class in the early winter as well. But so far it's kind of been more one-on-one. That photo included there is a photo I took last year while Seth and I were out going to a site project that's been used as advertising material for us a good bit. It's 2 fields side by side. The The field on the right was tilled in the fall, and then we had a good bit of rain. The field on the left was left as a hay field, and that's just a good promotion to show what like cover crops or stuff with continuous vegetation. You can see the difference of the water quality there coming off the tilled field versus the one that actually has some living roots in it. You can see where the waters converge there in the culvert. That field on the right, all that manure, fertilizer, lime, anything they invested in that field, they're just losing all their soil and everything along with it. It's not good for the field, not good for farming, not good for the water. That picture really demonstrates it pretty well. So we've been using that quite a bit as advertisement. The other part I cover is farmland preservation program. As of the end of last year, we've had 4 agreements in Ashland County covering about 2,100 acres. At the end of last year, the state changed what that program is. Essentially, what farmland preservation is farmers previously would sign up their field for 15 years, and they'd have to maintain compliance with state standards. And then if they fell within an agriculture enterprise area, they could get up to $5 per acre per year. At the end of last year, they reduced that that time limit to $10 or 10 years, and they increased the payment by double to $10 per acre per year. And so that incentive has got some more people interested in the program. Hopefully we'll see that growing into the future. Mary Jo also kind of touched on it. At the end of last year, or all of last year, I was the wildlife damage abatement and claims program coordinator for Ashland County. I also covered Bayfield and Iron County. And the workload got to be pretty heavy. We dealt a lot with crop damage last year. We had quite a bit of elk damage in the summer. Typically, it would be a slower time of the year for damage, and the elk damage was just piling up quite a bit. As a total last year, we had 8 enrollments. I dealt with a whole bunch more people than 8 people though in Ashland County than that. 8 ended up enrolling where we could actually help their scenario. We had 4 claims, which totaled $17,170 paid out to farmers for that. One of those claims was a maximum claim, which was the first one I ever dealt with. And that was for elk damage down in Butternut. They cleared out, the first night they called me, they lost an entire cornfield in a single night from a herd of elk. And they were moving rapidly. And we spent $9,282 on abatement last year. That was higher than most typical years because of that elk we had. We bought a new repellent, which was quite expensive. It was $134 an acre applied. But I believe we were the first people in the state of Wisconsin to use it. DNR was pretty happy that we were able to test it out. They were pretty supportive of us using it. They were very supportive of us going over the budget for that, and they reimbursed us for that. And we're pretty happy. The photos there are just some of the photos that I provided. That top left photo, that's a circle that bear would make in a cornfield. Typically, when the corn, just before it hardens, it goes into what we call the milk phase. It gets real sweet, kind of like sweet corn. They go out there, they roll in it, rake it up, and then they just sit and eat corn. And then you can see the bottom right too. That's a field with just pockets and pockets. I mean, I think most of those are 20 foot by 20 foot. That's a lot of corn damage in a hurry. Then you can see me standing in a smaller pocket top right. We'd have to go out there and do appraisals on what their yields on the corn were, and then actually set prices, which would have been done at the county level. And I believe you guys still will do, but it'll be the Wildlife Services, the federal government, that'll do that. And then in the middle there's just a picture, that middle picture. That's just a piece of corn of what it looks like from elk damage. It looks pretty different than a lot of other damage. They typically just would snip the tops depending on the time of year they were snipping it, but that's pretty standard elk damage. The plant still grows, but doesn't produce a head a lot of the times, or a pretty unusable head. And we did turn that program over. It still kind of runs through the county, but it's administered day to day by Wildlife Services now. And then the last thing to report on is the no-till drill. We rent out a no-till drill throughout the county. When I started in early 2022, the drill needed quite a bit of repairs when I saw it. So we took it and had it serviced. That's why you see that negative number for cost for how many repairs there were. And it got quite a few repairs. A lot of the farmers were real happy with it the next year that saw it. We did have a lower bit of numbers last year for actual rentals. That was mostly because spring was really wet. A lot of people couldn't get planted right away, and then the summer dried out so much, especially in the clay ground. It just wouldn't go through. It wouldn't close up, and just so many guys, it just didn't work out. We had a pretty average amount of people signed up on the list, but so many of them fell throughout the summer. And we had a couple people who were gonna put in some pretty big acreage that just, their leases fell through. But we're looking quite good this year. We've had a hard time getting people planted, but we've got, I've got like 13 people already signed up for this year. Just need it to stop raining. And should have a pretty good year on that so far this year. Anyone have any questions on any last year's stuff?
Perfect. All right, that wraps up the report. If anyone has any questions after the fact, feel free to ask or talk about it after the meeting. Thank you.
That was a very informative annual report there. Sounds like you're doing a really good job. Thank you. Climate change adaptation discussion. George?
Without intending to prolong this meeting too long, I would just like to request from the staff, if you could quickly summarize any actual impacts experienced over the last 10 years that we're actually seeing that you think are driven by this issue.
Sure. In 2019, when we wrote our land and water resource management plan, we brought the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, NIAX, in, and they provided a workshop to our committee on the exact documented data for northern Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Some of these included an increase of 1.4 inches of annual increase of precipitation noticed in Ashland County over the last 50 years. It was an increase in annual temperature, and there was an increase in the number of days that we have of heavy rains. And heavy rains are considered at 4 inches or more of precipitation. So that number of days has doubled in the last 50 years. There's quite a bit of data too, George, in our land and water plan that shows like some statistics. So we're seeing an increase in precipitation is the main thing that I want to focus on. And the precipitation that we're seeing an increase in is also shifting to the times of year when we see it. So historically, we used to receive more rain precipitation in the summer, July and August. Now what we're experiencing on the landscape is more rains in the spring and the fall. And what our farmers are experiencing is later planting dates in the spring, and then challenges getting their crops off the fields in the fall. And this has been happening repeatedly over the last several years. So it's also happening to shorten our growing season here. So there's, a number of different factors. Increase in annual precipitation, a shift in the precipitation patterns, and then also an increase in the number of days per year that we have heavy rainfall events. And the heavy rainfall events are the ones that impact us greatly because they cause the most amount of soil erosion. They also cause substantial changes to our stream channels where they deepen the channel or incise the channel. And particularly on the clay basin, the Marengo area, a lot of these streams are no longer connected to their floodplain. So now when we get even small rain events, the water hits those incised or deepened channels. They flow very quickly and they're not allowed to spread out onto the floodplain to slow down. So it also has increased the amount of sedimentation coming off the land and the amount of erosion that we're seeing on the landscape. Now, there's probably a lot of other factors, pests, and changes in types of trees and species, but I'm not as familiar with that as what I'm familiar with from the precipitation side of things.
The other thing, a related thing that's changed is you mentioned, the lack of cover crops, with crops coming off later, especially corn. It's just too late to cover crop, with the corn and soybeans coming off. And in this area, at least, with the dairy farms waning compared to when we were younger, there's so much more ground that's worked up each year. So that one field, was worked up in the fall, which really doesn't make a lot of sense, even if it was in corn or soybeans, because there's more erosion, because there's more surface area for that water. So it's harder to cover crop because of those long, wet falls. When the CAFA wanted to come here, they've planned it based on Iowa weather, which made no sense because they said they were going to inject the manure after the corn was off, which on an average year is near impossible up here to do. But, Mary Jo, part of what we have up here is this old Lake Superior shoreline. So the land I have, that higher, drier ground, that has to be, if it's planted in the spring, it has to be planted as soon as you can plant. Otherwise, it just dries out, a lack of germination. And yet the lower ground, a quarter mile away or less, that is so wet that, this is just a good typical year. The higher grounds in winter wheat, which, was good, and fortunate with the rain and it being worked up no-tilled last fall. But then the lower ground, they really struggled with those big tractors with tracks to get corn in on the lower ground this year. So the growing season, and there's a definition of growing season, if I'm not mistaken, is from your average last fall in the spring to your average last fall in the spring or in the fall. So as a gardener, when I look at the growing season, I'm getting a longer growing season. But if I'm the farmer trying to plant corn and soybeans, et cetera, the season in which I can get on that field is shorter, and the predictions with climate changes, corn production is actually going to decrease in northern Wisconsin here, which has implications for if CAFOs want to come, because when they raise corn and soybeans, it's not really that they need it for the food so much for their animals, they need a place to put the manure. And if crop production yields go down, they need more land to spread the manure on. So the CAFO that proposed coming here, they looked at growing corn in Iowa. They didn't look at growing corn here. And then they realized they needed more land because they needed more access to spreading nutrients. So if farming continues to change with corn and soybeans, and if we do get operations up here with large heads of animal, they're going to work up even more ground, which means more erosion and thus more importance to what you're trying to do. So it's one thing, climate change, but it's also how our economy and ag has changed in the last few generations with what we have here. I'd love to see more ground back into hay, but then somehow you've got to make that work too. And that's been a struggle for guys to make as much money on hay as they can on corn and soybeans. So if our federal subsidies would change, that would actually, in many ways, be positive for our land and water. So.
George, we could schedule a workshop too, if you'd like that.
Well, I think that could be useful in the future, perhaps in the fall would be a good timing for that.
And George, this will be also one of the topics of the planning committee. So.
Right, I understand that. So a workshop could be useful to both this committee and the planning committee.
Right.
If it were properly timed, but I think the fall would be a better time to think about that.
I haven't been here for the last decade. I've been here for 3 years, George, but one thing that I heard out of a farmer in Douglas County that's kind of interesting, and I've been talking with more farmers about it. There's this product called Aglin, that this farmer and farmers in Douglas County went to a demonstration on. It's a food additive to dairy cows that you would add, and it slows down the digestion. There's a lot of products out there that are seaweed based too. I don't think this one's seaweed based. I don't remember what this one's based on. Slows down the digestion, which reduces methane emissions, but it also improves nutrient uptake from the cows on less feed. And so in theory, if there's lower yields from drier summers or wetter springs and drier summers, a combination of that, the food that we have should go a lot farther. Because a huge one I'm hearing from farmers is that they're after more and more forage. Well, if a product like this, not necessarily saying I'm pushing this product for people, but it's something to have on their radar. Something like this, if we can utilize what we've got and encourage more alfalfa or hay, stuff like that, encourage those types of crops to go farther, I think that would help too. And there was a demonstration in Douglas County. I was on a farm that purchased a product, and I was there the first day he ever fed it. And I happened to have to meet with the guy 2 weeks later, and his dairy production went through the roof in a matter of 2 weeks. He was extremely happy with it. His cows had no aversion to it. He only feeds half a cup to about 100 head. He's an all organic grass-fed dairy. And they make a conventional dairy product too. It is expensive, but he said for him, even the cost of it, it's totally something for him. And that's something I'd be interested in trying to do, like a winter education type of session or something on, just trying to make more people aware of something like that. Is people are asking questions like that too constantly. I talk with so many farmers. People are definitely interested in different types of regenerative agriculture and things they can do. And even from the first year, I didn't hear a whole lot of it, and I'm hearing more and more about stuff like that every single year. So there's definitely an interest, and that's just in the 3 years I've been here.
Any more discussion? We'll move on to number 13.
Chair, I guess as long as our grant writer's here, is there anything potentially on alternate crops that perhaps writing a grant for might make sense? There's the hybrid popple that's been around for a while, and hazelnuts, is a work in progress. But is there anything else that potentially, from a grant writing perspective, that might be worth looking into that you can think of? Anybody?
I mean, people have experimented with Kernza up here already too a little bit, which like Kellogg had some money out there for, or Kellogg, or might have been General Mills, offered some incentives for people to have. I know NRCS has some programs to try to incentivize people who aren't already cover cropping to get into cover cropping. It is a type of thing. It just depends on like if there is an actual good product. I don't necessarily like Kern's is far off. It's not, it's probably gonna take 3 decades before it's something that actually makes sense. Hazelnuts, Jason's working on that. Off the top of my head, I can't think any crop in particular that would make sense to try, but I'm always kind of looking into stuff like that.
Okay, we'll go on to NRCS agency and staff reports.
We're currently working on, we just finished up doing equip contracts. We did almost 40 of those. And now we're on to our next program, working on conservation stewardship program contracts. And though that program is kind of a further land stewardship after you've kind of done a bunch of your conservation and management through equip. We've been working on a soil health strategy to talk about cover crops and different things that we can try implementing up here. But it's hard with the short growing season and winter coming so early that after harvest, there's not enough time in some situations to get your cover crop planted, get it established before it's covered in 2 feet of snow. So we have a lot of climate restrictions, and a lot of our heavy clay plain is also a little bit restrictive as well. We are currently short-staffed. We lost our technician. Her husband was a professor at the college, and when they announced it was going to close, she found a job in Stevens Point. So that is looking to be advertised maybe in July on USA Jobs. So hopefully we fill that. Currently, it's just myself and another permanent full-time federal employee. And then the next big thing is the local work group meeting that's in Barron County Government Center. Since COVID, they've had those on Teams, and so it's probably the first time since 19 that they've had them in person. And I haven't really been a part of one yet because I've only been here for a year and a half and came from Nebraska. But we encourage local landowners and conservation agencies to attend. And it's a good chance to address kind of what you feel is immediate resource concerns for agriculture, wildlife, forestry, to our state technical advisory committee. And then they put those into consideration for our ranking criteria. Our programs are competitive, and every year national gives each state limited funds. And so each state takes this information and gives certain practices X amount of points. So if cover crops is a priority, that gets more points than maybe another practice. So it kind of helps the state determine what type of applications people are applying for would address the most resource concerns and gain the most points to be awarded funding.
I'll start the other land conservation staff report. We'll just keep it quick. A lot of what I already talked about was in the annual report, kind of carrying over from that natural flood management project that got carried over, and Tom Kriskovich project, half of that got carried over. There's a few other projects we have lined up for this year as far as cost share goes. One with NRCS historically, and this may or may not change with new LCC members, but historically we had prioritized cost sharing with NRCS projects to make the landowners' money go further. So that way they could get double cost sharing, and we could implement more projects on the ground and keep it as cost effective for the landowner as possible. So that's kind of how we've been operating so far. So one project is planned later on this year. Michael and I have been talking back and forth about that. Water quality monitoring, I also tag along with USGS throughout the summer during rain events, and they help us out a good deal with monitoring for our projects as well. And attended some trainings at the state conference. Mary Jo, myself, and other partners were asked to give a presentation on the post-assisted log structures, and also gave a presentation on those at the Northwest Area Technician meeting in Chippewa Falls, and conducted the well sampling program for 20 participants. So I will pass it along to Matt.
So I already talked about what a nutrient management plan was. I'll try to keep it pretty quick too. I've done 12 updates so far in 2024, sat down with people. I've got 2 that are still in progress. 5 brand new nutrient management plans are currently being developed, waiting on some soil sample results back. It looks like we're going to spend that allocated nutrient management funding in all 4 counties that I cover, which is really, really good. A big one that I've been working on are the 4 field days that have been that we're going to host in 2024. There's going to be 1 in each of the 4 counties that I cover. Those are paid for by a grant that is hosted by Douglas County. So I work in coordination with them pretty close on that. And Ashland County has a date and time set for theirs. It's going to be July 25th at 5 p.m. Right on Highway 112. It's going to be focused on nutrient management and available agricultural resources to farmers. Should be pretty good. It's going to have, it'll have county staff, it'll have NRCS, the NRCS health team, or soil health team, it'll have FSA, it'll have UW presenters at it. It should be a really good event, show off some cost share practices. The one in Bayford County beyond grazing, there's several really good ones coming up that will do some promotional mailers and stuff coming out on pretty quick. I'd highly recommend attending them. They should be really good presentations. So far I've sent out 2 newsletters across the 4 counties. and have one right now that's going to be going in several different papers, promoting all the different services that are offered, nutrient management, farmland pres, no-till, stuff like that. And then I did help write a grant for farmer education grant with Douglas County that covers the northern four again, but it's a little more tailored to what we're learning is working with this one. So it should be a really good grant next year. We'll find out in July if we were awarded that one. Farmland preservation, I already mentioned the updates on that. I've got 4 compliance reviews this year that'll do on site and working on getting 1 new agreement signed in Ashland County, no-till, kind of already touched base on that. Took it out of storage, had the yearly maintenance completed. We've had 3 rentals done so far, 2 with soybeans, 1 of clover. When I wrote this, there were 8 rentals. Since the time I've had 2 more calls, so there's 10 rentals that are signed up to rent it. Just waiting for it to dry out. And then we had a new sign developed and printed with Heart Graphic this year to go on it. And it's planning to go to all the field days and to all of the county fairs, also for promotion, which should be really, really good. And all of the paperwork, the agreements, the flyers, brochures, all of that were updated, printed, and distributed. And then just on the back through a couple photos of some of the farms I've been on, just because photos are nice and seen a lot of words today. Any questions?
We got till 11:30 to eat, so I'll ask you this now. We got till 11:30 to eat, so I'll ask you this now. Do you have like a 1-page flyer or maybe a couple of pages? So if I were to talk to someone on a nutrient management plan, it would go through, why it exists. And then and specifically details like, well, who's going to enter this into a computer program and do that? What information does that landowner have to provide so that you can get through the process? So a few of the people out my way, I talked to them and a couple, so I didn't have all the records going all the way back, this and that. And so, if I, or, let's say the county mailed this out to landowners that don't have a nutrient management plan, so that they could look at that and say, okay, here's the reason it exists, here's what's in it for me, here's what's in it for the land.
Yep.
And that way, if they met with you, they would know what you need on your end so that you can sit down with them and get through the process. So they come with their records, and all of that good stuff. Because right now you got, someone say, well, I don't have this, I don't have that. And then I can tell it's just harder to get them to talk with you again.
Yep. Yeah, the state has a developed, that's like a single flyer and brochure that they like to be distributed. That's pretty general. And then each county specific, even in the northern 4 that I covered, each one's kind of a little different. And it's different too for each individual farmer. You and I've talked about it a little bit. But there have been broad ones. This was one of the newsletters sent out, and it does talk a little bit about it. There was a different one out there. There is the next newsletter going out. I'm going to do 4 this year. Is exactly what you're describing.
So
It's more of a, I don't want to use it, it's a little more simplified. Here's exactly what you need. You don't necessarily have to have records going back forever. We can essentially start from scratch. If you got records, great. If not, we can start.
Yeah, so that part's in there, and that you're gonna sit down at the computer and enter it, and they don't have to.
Exactly.
So I'm hearing some of those sort of things.
Yep.
And if we can do that, and it's good for lots of reasons, but one of which is just the economic development, and it brings money into the county, and it helps these people stay on the land more so than otherwise. So there's benefits to the county in that standpoint too.
Yep.
And then if they're in those ag enterprise zones, so some of the people I know out in my neck of the woods, they always say, if I can get enough rent to pay the taxes, we can keep the land. And yet over the years, there's people that, lose it because they can't pay the taxes. So that $40 is real money.
Yep.
That helps to keep some of it from being developed or, turned into something else. So.
Yeah. And that's like on this one here too. What I really wanted to highlight, what's really big when you and I talked to about the change of the farmland preservation agreement, it's going to help with exactly what you're talking about, lowering it from 15 down to 10 years and then doubling the payment. That's going to help a lot of the exact scenario you're talking about. So that was highlighted pretty well, I think, in this one. And additional incentives this year, on top of the $40 per acre, which is what I worked on with the grant to cover the 4 as well, for even more incentives to try to get people into it. The first one that went out was a little more wordy, a little more technical. This one's a little more picture friendly, and this one I included shows a good bit. And the next one's going to be a lot more simplified type of version. Yeah. Okay.
Alrighty, so I will keep this pretty short and sweet. Talked a good amount on our invasive species program, our tree and shrub program, poster and speaking contests, environmental education, all that kind of good stuff. So, yeah, if you have any questions about that, feel free to catch me after the meeting, or you can ask them now if you would like as well. But I just want to take a couple minutes. The most exciting news that I have to share right now is sitting just to my right. So Ellie is on board. She is our 2024 conservation technician. I met Ellie at the Northland College Career Expo and had a really good conversation with her, and told Mary Jo that we're going to have to throw out all the stops to make sure that we can get her on board for the summer. So very excited to have her on board. She started May the 30th, so she's yeah, just kind of only about a week and a half in. So doing a lot of training and orientation with her, and we've had some field projects, some rusty crayfish projects, and she attended Kids Fishing Day with myself this past weekend. So yeah, doing a wonderful job. Super excited to have her on board, and I will save a few minutes for Ellie in case you want to just kind of introduce yourself, and yeah, if you have anything else to share. But super pumped to have her on board.
I don't have much to say, so I'll keep it really short. But I'm very excited to get in the water this summer and also be at boat landings educating the public on the aquatic invasive species in the area. So yeah, the summer is going to be really fun.
And I'm not gonna elaborate on anything else. You guys have my report. I shared a lot of our updates about grants. So if you have any questions on my report, just feel free to ask.
Is that about it for the reports then? Very informative again, thank you. Other business? George?
Okay, so I'm going to be a bit of a trouble banker. I'd like to place a request for our future agenda for our next meeting to have the department and staff do a presentation and or discussion regarding the impacts if and when the pipeline is constructed through Ashland County. Now, I'm given to understand that this is not our problem, that this is DNR, federal standards, state standards, and that the company that would be doing a project knows what they're doing and would do it well within the standards. However, I'd like to understand what those standards are, what they are required, what's the requirement for compliance, what are the concerns if there's non-compliance, what are the side effects that might be concerned. Now, we know that landowners have agreed mostly to the potential construction through their properties, but there will be neighbors, and there will be, if the project goes forward, there will be complaints, and it's likely to make our public comment and or public access periods a lot more lively because it's a long-term project, and there will be certainly side effects. So you know that you're all aware probably that on Tuesday there were hundreds of people at Northwood Tech for the hearing held by the Army Corps of Engineer. I've never seen a greater amount of public interest in anything in this community in all the time that I've lived here. The parking lots were overflowing. Cars were parked up Beezer Road. The sign-up lists were full, and that was a hearing that ran morning, afternoon, and evening. So there's an incredible amount of interest. We're likely to hear about it over the coming year, if and when the project goes forward. I'd like to know, what are we dealing with? What are the requirements for the preservation of land and water? What could be the side effects? And what are we at risk of having to answer to our citizens since we represent the citizens of the county. So I'm just requesting that go on our next agenda.
Yeah, and I would recommend bringing in a specialist because the permit was over 10,000 pages for that, and it would take me months to actually read that permit request to understand what the guidelines and regulations are for that. I mean, I can tell you what the consequences to an oil spill are, but as far as what the standards are that they have to uphold, that's going to take me months to research that. So I don't know if there's like a DNR person that we can bring in, or if there's an Army Corps, whoever was presenting at that hearing. I'm not sure, but that would take substantial time for us to try and develop that as a staff.
Yeah, I'm not thinking of oil spills at all. I'm thinking about the construction period. So you've got a 20-mile plus or minus disruption of the land and water contours of Ashland County, potentially. And it could be done right. I'm not taking a position on whether this should or should not happen. I'm thinking about what does that disruption of the land entail? What are the concerns in terms of soil and water conservation? And which certainly is our topic.
Would we want Enbridge to come and talk about what they do?
I think you're talking more like maybe someone from DNR or someone from state who is responsible for overseeing such a project and ensuring that the state standards are complied with. That would probably, but it has to be a neutral source.
The stormwater permit contact would be a good resource to reach out for. Because I think through the DNR, that's who they had to apply through, at least for their permits. So maybe they would have time, but.
Thank you.
Okay, other business too.
Pat has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Well, George, I'm glad you brought that up. I was thinking along the same lines and trying to say, how do you say something like that and say it in either a positive way or a way that maybe gets us somewhere. But and I guess the way I was thinking about it, are there any opportunities potentially if they're going to move that much ground and go through, some wetlands and cross streams and all that? Are there any opportunities where, just thinking of the lay of the land, if they're going to, go through and move that much material, to maybe do something to slow the flow somewhere? So now if we just change the landscape a bit on the grade, there's an opportunity to slow the flow, or maybe put in, some form of wetland or something, in places that, as long as we're at it, is there something we can do? And again, maybe some grant money, they're small things, but when you move that much material, you have an opportunity to do something, different than what was there. And I just don't know if there's, I don't know the route well enough to know how that would work, or if Enbridge would work with us on that.
George.
I just think that's a wonderful comment to look there. This could be an opportunity. There may be problems, but there could be opportunity. It's a brilliant idea.
It's actually very hard to find the finalized route. I have researched that. There's not updated maps right now. So the only way I would know of getting that is directly from Enbridge, and I'm not sure if they will release that or not. But there's not information publicly available on whatever route has been finalized. I mean, the routes that are shown were the original routes for the landowners that did sign approval. But I know that some of those routes have changed based on the initial boring drillings that were conducted. So yeah, I don't know. I can try and ask someone at Enbridge. I'm not sure if they are releasing the finalized route or not.
There is not a finalized route yet. That's part of what the Army Corps hearing was about.
George.
Right. It just might be a moot question until, if and when the project is approved. I'm just wanting us to be prepared in a general way to answer questions from our constituents. I don't know how to answer those questions if they come up from my neighbors along the possible route. I don't know what the requirements are for the company that constructs their project. I don't know how to make people feel okay about it, feel safe about it. And I'm just looking for a general outline. I'm not really looking for the specifics because it doesn't really come to us with complaints or anything until if and when and after the thing gets underway, which could be a couple of years from now, for heaven's sakes. Yeah.
Decades. Could be decades.
Other business, Land Conservation Committee training is next Friday, June 14th in Spooner. So I have emailed all of you. I've gotten 2 people that have agreed to go. That is being hosted by the Wisconsin Land and Water. It's a fantastic, fantastic training, much better than what I can do. They haven't offered that in about 4 years. So I anticipate we won't see one of those trainings again for probably another 3 or 4 years. So if you're able to attend and interested, I do need to register people. And then I also provided you with the Wisconsin Land and Water webinars and a list of acronyms this morning, so be sure to check that out. And I wanted to ask if there is, for the new members and existing members, if you guys would prefer to meet on a certain day and time. So traditionally, we just pick days that work best. In the past, prior to my time, they used to meet on Fridays, and I know that that was discouraged when I came on board because it didn't work for a lot of the committee members. But I guess I just wanted to ask if there was any preferred meeting days of the week or times, and I would try to honor that. And then after that too, Charlie had requested at the last meeting that we have a conversation on lawns. And I forgot to put that on the agenda, and I see he's not here anymore, so I'll just hold off on that. Okay.
Moving on to the next meeting date.
I would propose meeting in a couple months in August. Does that work for people? How about August 20th? The Thursday, the same time, 9 a.m.
My calendar says August 20th is a Tuesday.
Sorry, Tuesday, August 20th. Is that going to be county board? Okay.
Any other comments or suggestions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
Jerry.
would back, I don't want to back up anymore, but on
Hold on.
proposed,
Tuesday, August 20th is not going to work. The Board of Canvas meets in this room. She's going to have it all day. They have to meet 1 week after the primary.
How about Wednesday, the 21st?
You can pencil that in and I'll check with her to make sure she doesn't need it then.
Okay. Okay, and I do want to mention the food setup guys are coming back at 11:15, so we are going to have to clear all those sides of the desk.
Did you get your question answered, Jerry?
well, I don't really know. Because we have some time, I'm going to say this, but back on the Enbridge thing where the line's coming through, it affects me directly and I'm glad to hear what you brought up here, George. I have relatives and friends, and one of them has a sign up that we support Line 5 and the other one doesn't, and so on and so forth. But anyway, I'm at right in between it. I got it on both sides of me. So it hasn't really divided the area because everybody respects each other enough. So we're fortunate enough, if that continues, good. And we all understand the need and all that, but we need the conservation behind it and the protection. And I think that's important. We talk about it. Thank you.
Very good. Would that be, Pat?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Till we meet again tentatively August 21st. That was painful.